Why did they laugh the moment she walked through the gates? Sarah Martinez had barely taken 5 steps into camp before the stares started. Whispers, then chuckles, then outright laughter as one of the drill instructors scanned her up and down like she'd wandered into the wrong story. 5'2", 110 pounds, dark eyes that refused to drop. Martinez, the instructor barked, "You sure you're in the right place? Ballet Academy's north of here." The platoon erupted. Laughter rolled across the formation like a wave, but Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't look at them. Her jaw locked, her spine straightened, and that familiar fire she'd carried since childhood flickered hotter in her chest. Because this wasn't new. She'd been hearing versions of the same joke since she was 8 years old. Back then it was Marines mocking her. It was neighborhood kids in East Lowe's Angels, her brother's friends, coaches, strangers who thought they were clever, always the same look, a smirk that said, "You don't belong here." Her father had said it too, though softer, almost kindly. Boxing, not for little girls. He'd been tired from 12 hours on construction sites, his voice rough with cement dust and exhaustion. Her mother had already left for the night shift, scrubbing office floors. But Sarah had refused to let it go. She followed her 3 older brothers to boxing gym and planted her tiny frame in the doorway like she was unmovable. "I want to learn," she'd said. They laughed then too. Even old school, one eye half shut from a career of taking punches, had tried to wave her off, but she hadn't blinked. So had sighed, strapped gloves to her hands and pointed to the bag. "Footwork first, then we'll see." And she saw. In weeks she was dancing around boys 40 pounds heavier. When Carlos, the neighborhood's loudest and meanest kid, had mocked her one afternoon, she'd stepped into the ring with him. The gym had gone silent, every eye waiting for her to be crushed. But she wasn't crushed. She slipped his wild swing, landed 3 sharp jabs that shocked everyone, then put him flat on his back with a clean uppercut and a sweep that looked effortless. The silence that followed had been deafening. Then the claps came, slow, disbelieving, then thunderous. That was the day Sarah realized something important. She didn't need to be bigger. She just needed to never back down. It was that lesson she carried to the yellow footprints at camp. But if her childhood had taught her grit, the Marines tested it differently. The first month wasn't just push-ups, runs, and endless drills. It was ridicule, isolation, the kind of psychological needles meant to break people down. Every mess hall meal felt like sitting at the wrong cafeteria table in middle school. Conversation stopped when she sat. Smirks, mutters. Sometimes silence was then insults. During runs, she heard the snickers behind her. "My grandmother moves faster." Even when she finished near the top 10%, it never mattered. Doubt weighed heavier than her rucksack. Her bunkmate Jake was 6'4", built like an oak tree, and had played college football before enlisting. On their third night, as Sarah sat writing a letter home by the dim barracks light, he finally said what everyone else was thinking. "Martinez, no offense, but why are you even here? This isn't some game. Out there, people depend on you. You're half my size." Sarah had looked up slowly. "What makes you think I can't handle it?" Jake laughed. "Come on, be realistic. Size matters." The words hit like a body shot, not because she hadn't heard them before, but because here in this place she'd fought to reach, it suddenly mattered more. His tone wasn't cruel. It was honest. He was afraid she'd be a liability, a weak link, someone who could get them killed. That night Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling, the whispers of doubt pressing harder than the drill instructors' voices ever could. She remembered her mother's plea, "Find a nice job. Maybe get married. You're too small, Sarah." But she also remembered Carlos lying on the mat, the look of stunned respect in his eyes. She whispered to herself in the dark, "Size isn't everything." The breaking point came in week 4, stick training. Recruits in helmets and pads, wielding long padded staffs designed to simulate bayonet combat. Controlled aggression, they called it, but everyone knew it was more than that. It was a proving ground. Sergeant Johnson's grin said it all when he paired her with Brown. 6 feet tall, Detroit tough, quick, cocky, and loud about his opinions on women in combat. The circle formed. The recruits leaned in, hungry for the spectacle. "Fight until one's down or yields," Johnson barked. The moment the whistle blew, charged. He swung wide, heavy strikes smashing into her protective gear, each one jarring through her bones. The crowd roared with every hit. "Put her down, Brown," someone yelled. "Show her what real Marines look like." Sarah absorbed it. She let him swing. She studied the rhythm, the sloppiness that came when arrogance blurred control. Her arms ached from blocking, her chest burned from impact, but she waited. Then overreached, a wild overhand swing aimed at her helmet. Sarah stepped inside the arc, deflected the blow with her forearm, and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. The breath whooshed out of him. He folded. Before he could recover, she swept his legs clean, and the earth itself seemed to vanish under him. He crashed to the ground, stunned, and when he tried to rise, her stick was already across his throat. Calm, controlled, unshakable. The circle froze. For the first time since she arrived, there was no laughter, only silence. "Tap the mat in surrender." Sarah pulled him up gently, respect clear in the gesture. Sergeant Johnson's face had changed. No smirk, no mockery, just a long, measured look. "Outstanding technique, Martinez." And then the unexpected happened. "I'll go," Jake said. But his tone wasn't mocking, it was curious. Their match lasted longer. Jake used his size better than had. He fought smarter. But Sarah stayed inside his timing, exploited his angles, and brought him down. One by one, 3 more recruits stepped forward. Each fell. Each time Sarah offered her hand. No gloating, no arrogance, just quiet acknowledgement. By the time David, the platoon's best hand-to-hand fighter, faced her, the air had shifted completely. The recruits leaned in, not to watch her fail, but to see if she really was as good as they were beginning to believe. The fight with David was brutal, technical, balanced. He matched her skill with skill. For minutes they traded strikes, blocks, sweeps. Sweat stung her eyes, her chest heaved. Then he slipped just slightly. An off-balance move, a fraction of hesitation. Sarah saw it, exploited it. A sweep, a chokehold, and David tapped. The silence broke, applause, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Jake was the first to step forward, voice steady, eyes clear. "Martinez, I was wrong about you." One by one they followed. Recruits who had smirked at her now shook her hand. Even, still sore, offered a nod of respect. That night Sarah sat at her bunk again, pen in hand, writing to her mother. But the words came differently. The weight felt lighter. For the first time since arriving, she belonged. Jake's voice broke the quiet. "Where'd you learn to fight like that?" Sarah smiled faintly. "Long story, maybe I'll tell you sometime." She didn't know it yet, but the story was just beginning. How quickly can a reputation change? One afternoon of combat training was all it took. In the morning, Sarah Martinez had been the joke of her platoon. By evening, she had become something else entirely. But respect was a double-edged blade. Word spread faster than she expected. Recruits who had once snickered now approached her with hesitant admiration. Some asked for tips, their voices awkward, as if unsure how to speak to her. Others, competitive by nature, came forward eager to test themselves against the girl who had humiliated Brown and outmaneuvered David. In the mess hall, the laughter stopped when she walked in, not from cruelty, but from a strange kind of silence that follows fear and curiosity. They whispered still, but differently now. Not "she doesn't belong." More like, "what is she really capable of?" For Sarah, the shift was dizzying. She had fought for respect her entire life. Now she had it, and with it came something heavier: expectation. That night, lying awake in her bunk, she thought of her father, how he had warned her. The higher you climb, the more they want to see you fall. He'd been right before. He might be right again. By week 6, her name reached beyond Charlie Company. Drill instructors from Alpha and Bravo started showing up at training sessions, pretending to be casual observers. She noticed the way they studied her footwork, her timing, her ability to stay calm even when outmatched in size and strength. And then came Captain. He was the company commander, 15 years in the Corps, 3 deployments, a man known for being hard but fair. He had watched thousands of recruits cycle through, most followed patterns he could predict in minutes. The strong relied on brute force. The fast leaned into speed. The smart built strategies around patience and timing. Sarah was different. She blended all three, not because of natural gifts, but because necessity had forced her to. Every time she stepped into a ring, she had been forced to find ways around disadvantages. It had become instinct. Saw it, and he wanted to test it. The order came one humid morning. Sarah would be pulled from her platoon training to spar with the MPs, full Marines, experienced fighters trained specifically in close-quarters combat and subduing hostile individuals. The MPs weren't thrilled. Sergeant, a grizzled veteran with 20 years of service and scars across his knuckles, voiced what everyone else thought. "Sir, with respect, what am I supposed to learn from a 6-week recruit? She's a trainee." Only smiled. "Watch, you'll see." The first MP volunteer was Corporal Johnson, a college wrestler before joining the Corps. 6 feet, 200 pounds of confidence. He was told to go easy, to play along. Sarah studied him the moment he entered the mat. How his weight sat on his heels. How he carried his arms slightly high. Every detail mattered. When the whistle blew, Johnson lunged casually, expecting to toss her like a rag doll. Instead, she slipped his attempt, snapped a knee into his gut, and had him in a submission hold in under 30 seconds. His tap echoed louder than the slap of bodies against the mat. Blinked again. The second round, Johnson came serious. He used every ounce of his training. He fought hard, disciplined, and still he fell. By the end of the afternoon, 3 more MPs had tried. 3 more had lost. Shook his head. "In 20 years, I've never seen raw talent like this." Sarah didn't celebrate. She bowed her head, thanked each Marine she sparred against, and returned to her platoon quietly. But inside, something gnawed at her. Because with every victory, the whispers grew louder. Prodigy, natural-born fighter, legend in the making. She wasn't sure she wanted that. Legends were expected to never fail. And she was still failing, every day in small ways no one saw, the aching muscles she couldn't stretch out, the moments of doubt that returned late at night, the way her hands trembled sometimes after writing letters home. Her family didn't understand. Her mother's responses were filled with worry, not pride. "Please don't push yourself too far. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." But Sarah did. She had to prove it to herself. The test came during the combat tournament. Each company selected their best fighter. It was a tradition, a chance to measure not just strength but morale, pride, the spirit of the unit. Charlie Company's selection was automatic. When her name was called, some cheered. Others exchanged wary looks. It wasn't that they doubted her skill. They worried what it would mean if she lost now. After all the stories, after the myth of the tiny fighter had grown so large, what would it look like if she was finally broken? Her first opponent was from Alpha Company, no relation to the captain. 6'3", California-born, a wall of muscle. He had never lost a fight during training. The gymnasium buzzed with anticipation. Marines crammed shoulder to shoulder on the bleachers, eager to watch David topple Goliath. The whistle blew. Charged like a freight train, intent on ending the fight before it even began. Sarah, light as a shadow, and delivered 3 quick strikes to his ribs before melting away. The crowd gasped. Round after round, it played like a chess match. Slowed, adjusted, tried patience instead of brute force. Sarah matched him step for step. In the 3rd round, he went for a takedown. She sprawled, locked a guillotine choke, and held it. A minute of struggle, A minute of gritted teeth and pounding heartbeats. Then the tap. The gym erupted. Marines from every company pounded the bleachers in approval. But there was no time to bask. The semifinal was waiting. Corporal Davis from Bravo Company, two-time champion, a fighter with experience in multiple martial arts, his reputation was ironclad. When he entered the ring, he didn't smirk. He didn't underestimate. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect. The fight was a war. Davis neutralized her favorite moves. He forced her into corners she hated. She escaped barely time and again. Both bled from cuts. Both gasped for air. In the fourth round, exhaustion blurred the edges of Sarah's vision. Davis went for a leg lock, a move that would have ended it. Pain flared white-hot. Most would have tapped. But Sarah didn't. She twisted, flexible, unyielding. And then instinct, a spinning heel kick, desperate, perfect. The strike connected with Davis's temple. He collapsed unconscious. The crowd surged to its feet, roaring. Medical staff rushed in. Davis would be fine, but the championship would not be his. Sarah barely breathed as her hand was raised, because the next fight loomed even larger. Staff Sergeant. Not a recruit, an instructor, a decorated veteran with 3 combat tour. His name carried weight. His presence commanded respect. And he had agreed to step into the ring for an exhibition match against the smallest Marine recruit anyone could remember. It wasn't just another fight. It was a clash of worlds. If she won, she'd become a story whispered across every base. If she lost, no one would blame her, but the whispers of legend would vanish. That night back in her barracks, her friends crowded around with encouragement. Jake clapped her shoulder, voice firm. Win or lose, Martinez, you've already proved everything. But Sarah couldn't accept that. Not yet. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of her father, her mother in that dusty boxing gym, the look on Carlos's face when he fell years ago. She whispered to herself again, size isn't everything. But what if, this time, it wasn't enough? What does it feel like to stand across from a legend? The night of the championship match, Sarah Martinez felt every eye on her. The gymnasium at camp was packed shoulder to shoulder. Recruits, instructors, commanders, even local reporters had come. The air vibrated with tension, 1,000 conversations merging into one restless hum. Staff Sergeant entered first, decorated combat veteran, 3 tour overseas, taller, heavier, older. His reputation filled the room like a storm front. He raised one hand in acknowledgement, his expression controlled, calm, every inch the professional Marine. Then Sarah walked in. The noise shifted. Louder, younger voices cheered. She wasn't just a recruit anymore, she was a symbol, proof that the impossible could bend. A small, determined spark in a place built for giants. Inside, she was trembling. She kept her face still, her stride steady, but she could feel the pulse hammering in her throat. She thought of boxing gym, of her father, hands calloused from labor, shaking his head when she first strapped on gloves, of Jake and the others watching now, their hopes wrapped around her like armor. The referee's voice cut through the roar. 5 rounds, standard combat rules, fight until one yields, is knocked unconscious, or I stop it. Sarah untouched gloves. His eyes met hers, not mocking, not dismissive, just steady, sharp, weighing her soul. The bell rang. The first round was a study in patience, circled deliberately, using his reach, testing her reactions with light jabs and kicks. Sarah stayed light, darting in with quick combinations, pulling away before he could trap her. The crowd grew quiet, realizing this wasn't spectacle. It was chess. No clear winner, just 2 fighters mapping each other's terrain. Second round, pressed harder. He crowded her against the ropes, his strikes heavier now, thudding against her guard. Sarah's arms burned. Each impact rattled her bones. She slipped what she could, countered with sharp punches to the ribs, but the weight of his presence felt crushing. The crowd leaned forward, breath caught. Every time Sarah seemed cornered, she wriggled free. Every time landed a clean shot, she answered with precision. Third round, something shifted. Sarah found rhythm. She began creating angles, slipping past his guard, landing quick combinations that snapped his head back. 4 strikes in under 2 seconds. The crowd roared. His jaw tightened. He'd seen it before, a smaller fighter finding their window. He knew he had to close it. Fourth round, he changed strategy. He took her to the ground. One powerful takedown and the canvas slammed into Sarah's back. The crowd gasped. His weight bore down, his strength undeniable. He moved with experience, controlling her limbs, searching for the choke, the arm lock, the end. Sarah's lungs screamed, her vision blurred. The pressure was suffocating. This was where size mattered. This was where the whispers about liability came true. Is this it? The thought stabbed through her mind. Is this where it ends? But another memory rose unbidden, 8 years old. On the mat with Carlos, the boy who had mocked her, his shadow over her, the certainty of defeat. And then the sudden clarity, he was bigger, yes, but careless. She could use that. Now shifted slightly, adjusting his grip. A fraction of weight lifted from her hips. It was enough. She exploded. A hip escape, a reversal she drilled in gym until her hands bled. Rolled. For the first time, he was off balance. The crowd erupted. Marines jumped to their feet, voices cracking. Both fighters scrambled upright. His chest heaved, sweat dripping. Sarah's eyes burned wide, alive. She had survived his best ground game, and she wasn't finished. Final round. Every second crackled with urgency. Pressed forward, refusing to let the fight slip away. Sarah countered with everything she had, her body aching, her arms heavy, her breath ragged. 30 seconds left. Lunged for one final takedown. Desperation in the move. Sarah sprawled, her knees burning against the canvas, then drove a strike upward, a knee to his chest. He staggered back. She followed instantly. A flurry of punches, sharp, precise, each one fueled by every jeer she'd ever endured, every doubt she'd ever swallowed, fell. The referee's count rang through the chaos. 7, 8, 9. Struggled, tried to rise, couldn't. 10. The gymnasium exploded. The sound rattled the walls, shook the rafters, poured out into the California night. Sarah stood in the center of the ring, hands trembling, chest heaving, not in triumph, in disbelief. Staff Sergeant, the veteran, the instructor, the legend, was the first to step forward. He raised her hand himself, nodding with respect so absolute it silenced even the loudest voices in the crowd. Remember this night, he told the recruits watching. This is what the Corps is about, heart, skill, refusing to quit. For Sarah, the words were heavier than the victory. She had never sought to humiliate him, never wanted to be the center of attention. She only wanted to prove she belonged. Now she wasn't sure what she had proved. Because respect, once earned, changes everything. That night, Captain summoned her to his office. She entered bruised, sore, every muscle screaming. He studied her for a long moment. Martinez, in 15 years I've never seen anything like that. I've had calls from other commands already. People want to know who you are. Sarah stood at attention, uncertain how to respond. Leaned back. We can't treat you like any other recruit anymore. You're going into a different program. She swallowed, sir. An experimental unit, he explained. Virginia, new techniques, smaller Marines, adaptability. You'll help build something new. She blinked. It was everything she had fought for, and yet terrifying. Because she had never asked to be a symbol. That night, lying in her bunk, the applause of the crowd still echoing in her ears, she wrote a letter home. Papa, Mama, I wish you could have seen it. I won. But it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like a door just opened, and now I don't know where it leads. I only know I can't turn back. She didn't sleep. The whispers of doubt had changed form, not you can't. Now it was, what if you fail them? Outside, the base settled into silence. Inside, Sarah stared at the ceiling, the bruises on her body sharp reminders of what she had endured. And one thought kept pulsing through her mind. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. But action had consequences, and Sarah was about to learn that being respected could weigh heavier than being mocked. What happens when training meets reality? Sarah Martinez had asked herself that question countless times. In Virginia, she had been tested against Marines who wanted to win but never to kill. In tournaments, she had faced strikes meant to sting, not end a life. Afghanistan was different. There were no whistles here, no referees, no taps on the mat to stop the fight. Her unit's mission seemed routine: clear a compound suspected of housing 6 enemy combatants. Intelligence briefings made it sound controlled, predictable. She had studied the layout: narrow alleys, mud walls, a 2-story structure with possible sniper points. The kind of mission the Corps had run 100 times before. At dawn, they moved in. Desert air cold, sky painted with the faintest gray of coming sun. Sarah was on the entry team, rifle steady, eyes sharp, every sense on edge. For the first 100 yards, silence, too much silence. Then it happened. The point man stepped forward, and the world exploded. The IED ripped through the earth, tearing him apart instantly, throwing 2 more Marines back in a storm of dust and shrapnel. Sarah's ears rang, her vision blurred. Shouts cut through the haze. Pain, panic. Gunfire followed, sharp cracks from hidden positions inside the compound. They were ambushed. Sarah pressed herself against a wall, adrenaline flooding her veins. Her squad leader's voice crackled over comms, but the words came fractured, broken by interference. All she knew was that her unit was pinned, split into pockets, trapped in overlapping fields of fire. The enemy knew this terrain. They had prepared it. Her pulse hammered. Stay down. Wait for reinforcements. That was protocol, but reinforcements were 20 minutes away and they didn't have 20 minutes. Ammunition was already low. She peeked around the wall. Gunfire chewed into the stone near her head. She pulled back, heart pounding. Someone has to move. Decision carved itself into her mind with brutal clarity. If she waited, they would all die. She adjusted her grip on her rifle, took a breath and whispered, "Not today." Then she moved. Low, fast, every step deliberate. She slipped into the compound through a side passage she'd memorized during mission prep. Her breath came sharp, controlled, her ears straining for every scrape, every echo. The first enemy appeared suddenly, turning a corner with rifle raised. He was twice her size, muscle under loose robes, eyes wide with surprise. But Sarah didn't give him time. She closed the gap instantly, slamming his weapon aside, wrenching it free and driving her knee into his ribs. He crumpled. She secured the rifle, finished him quick, then kept moving. No time for hesitation. Further in, 2 more fighters positioned themselves with clear lines of fire toward her pinned teammates. She studied their stance, the angles of their cover. A plan snapped into place. She tossed a small rock down one corridor. The sound drew their heads just enough. She struck from the opposite angle, rifle burst sharp, precise. One down. The other turned too late. She swept his legs, jammed the butt of her rifle into his throat, silencing him before he could call out. Her chest heaved, 3 down. But the fight wasn't over. Through her comms, she heard fragments, her squad leader pinned, Jake's voice cut with static, pleas for ammo. Her unit was bleeding out across the compound, surrounded. Sarah pushed deeper. Each corner threatened death. Each shadow carried weight, but hesitation wasn't an option. Another firefight erupted. Bullets cracked, dust stung her eyes. She ducked, returned fire, heart pounding in her throat. She moved through rooms like water, unpredictable, untouchable, each strike guided by instinct honed over years of being underestimated. When she emerged into the courtyard, the tide had shifted. Half the enemy force was down. Confusion rippled through the survivors, their ambush unraveled. Her squad seized the opening, repositioning, firing with renewed strength. The remaining fighters broke, retreating into alleys, scattering like smoke. And just like that, silence again. But this silence was heavier. Sarah lowered her rifle slowly, her arms trembling. Around her, Marines regrouped, dragging wounded to cover, eyes wide with the realization of what had just happened. Her squad leader found her, face pale, blood streaked across his helmet. "Martinez, you just saved all of us." She wanted to believe that, but as she looked at the smoking crater where the point man had fallen, she felt no victory, only loss. That night under the desert stars, she sat alone, cleaning her rifle. Her hands moved mechanically, but her thoughts churned. Her actions had saved lives, but a man was still dead. Two more would carry scars forever. Could she call it a win? Could she ever? Jake sat beside her quietly. He didn't try to lighten the moment. He didn't need to. His presence said enough. Finally, he spoke. "You didn't freeze. You didn't wait. You acted." Sarah stared at the desert horizon. "I had to." Jake nodded. "That's what makes the difference." But in her chest, she felt the truth pressing harder. Acting had saved them, yes, but it had also stained her. The faces of the men she killed flickered in her mind's eye. Their eyes, their gasps, the weight of their bodies. She whispered to herself, so softly Jake couldn't hear, "I'll carry them." Because someone had to. Why was the classroom so quiet? Sarah Martinez stood in front of 30 fresh recruits at the sand depot, their eyes fixed on her. Some with awe, some with doubt, some with the same mocking disbelief she had once seen in Brown's smirk. She could feel their thoughts without hearing a word. "She's too small. This is the legend." She'd seen those looks her whole life. They used to sting. Now after Afghanistan, they hit differently. They didn't cut, they reminded her of who she'd been, who she'd become, and who she had lost along the way. She let the silence hang a moment longer. Then her voice cut through, calm but sharp. "Who here thinks they're tough enough to handle anything the Corps can throw at them?" Every hand shot up, some defiantly, some proudly. Sarah scanned the room. Her eyes landed on tall, athletic, built like the kind of Marine recruiters drooled over. His hand was raised high, her chin tilted with the kind of confidence Sarah recognized instantly. She'd worn it once herself. Sarah nodded. "Good, let's find out." She motioned toward the biggest recruit in the room, Robert Johnson, a 6'6" former football player from Texas. His frame dwarfed hers, his hesitation clear. "Johnson," she said, "take me down, use anything you want, don't hold back." He shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I don't want to hurt you." The recruits chuckled nervously, thinking the same thing. Sarah's tone hardened. "Marine, in combat, the enemy won't care about your concerns. They'll use every advantage they have to kill you. Are you going to follow orders or not?" The tension sharpened. Johnson swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." He lunged. Sarah moved like water, redirected his momentum, executed a hip throw so clean it echoed across the mat. Johnson hit the ground with a thud that silenced every whisper in the room. Before he could recover, she helped him up. Calm, composed, her voice carried. "Johnson is bigger, stronger, more athletic than I am by every measurable standard. But combat isn't about measurements. It's about preparation, technique, thinking under pressure. Size only matters if you let it." The recruit's eyes widened. Respect replaced smirks. Doubt turned to curiosity. But still stared, lips pressed, skepticism lingering in her gaze. Sarah noticed. She always noticed. Over the next weeks, Sarah drilled them hard. She pushed their limits, tore down assumptions, forced them to see that the battlefield didn't care about how much you could bench press. She sparred them one by one, sometimes two at a time, always emerging steady, breathing as though she just walked a flight of stairs. She taught that height and reach could be gifts, but dangerous if relied on too heavily. She showed Johnson that strength without leverage was wasted. She taught all of them that fear could sharpen or destroy. But while the recruits learned, Sarah carried something heavier. Afghanistan haunted her. At night, after the recruits had collapsed into bunks, she sat awake, cleaning her weapon though it didn't need cleaning, writing letters she never sent, hearing the explosion again, seeing the crater, smelling the smoke. She remembered the enemy fighters' faces, not faceless silhouettes. Men, one surprised, one defiant, one terrified at the end. Their eyes found her in dreams, whispering in languages she didn't understand but guilt translated perfectly. You killed us. Some mornings when she stood in front of her class, she wondered, what right do I have to teach them? But then challenged her openly. Instructor Martinez, she said one afternoon, voice steady but edged. With respect, these are controlled exercises. Real combat isn't like this. Out there, wouldn't size and strength still matter most? The room went still. Recruits shifted nervously. Sarah could feel every pair of eyes on her. She didn't get angry, she didn't snap. She only nodded. That's a fair question. Let me tell you about Afghanistan. The classroom leaned forward. Sarah's voice softened, heavy, carrying weight beyond instruction. She told them about the compound, the IED, the blast that killed the point man instantly, the 2 wounded, the chaos, the fear, the decision to move when every instinct screamed to stay down. She told them about rounding a corner and finding a man twice her size with a rifle already aimed, and choosing to close distance before he could pull the trigger. She described the fight, the chokehold, the silence after. She told them about the 2 more, armed and waiting, and how she used misdirection, noise, shadows to outmaneuver them. How she fought not with muscle but with desperation and training, how instinct became survival. She told them about her squad pinned down, voices broken with static, and how those moments decided whether they lived or died. When she finished, the room was silent. Skepticism was gone. Her jaw clenched, but her eyes were different now, respectful, and something else, fear maybe, understanding. Sarah let the silence sit heavy, then she spoke again. The point isn't that size doesn't matter. It does. Anyone who says otherwise is lying. The point is it's not the only thing. It's rarely the most important thing. Preparation, training, the ability to think clearly under pressure. That's what decides who walks away. The recruits didn't speak. They didn't need to. The lesson had landed. That night, Sarah sat alone again, staring out across the base. The stars above California looked different from Afghanistan, but the weight in her chest was the same. She had taught them truth, but truth wasn't clean. Yes, her actions in Afghanistan had saved lives, but they had also ended them. And though the recruits saw her as a symbol, the unbreakable, unstoppable Marine who every limitation, Sarah knew better. She wasn't unbreakable. She was already cracked. The only question was how long before the cracks spread. What happens when the student stops doubting? Had been Sarah's loudest skeptic. Tall, athletic, every inch the Marine prototype, she had arrived in San with a swagger Sarah recognized immediately. That confidence had once lived in her too. But after Sarah's story of Afghanistan, something changed. No longer asked whether Sarah's methods worked. She knew they did. The question now was whether she could live up to them. And Sarah saw it, the shift from doubt to hunger. Began staying late after drills, shadowboxing until sweat soaked the mat. She asked questions in a tone stripped of arrogance. She sparred with recruits bigger than her, testing limits, refusing to quit even when bruised and battered. One evening, long after most of the class had staggered back to bunks, Sarah found still training. Gloves on, hands raw, practicing throws again and again. Sarah leaned against the wall quietly. You're going to break your wrists if you keep throwing like that. Turned, startled, breath ragged. Ma'am, I was just. Don't explain, Sarah said softly, stepping forward. She adjusted stance, corrected her grip, shifted her weight. Again. Through clean this time, balanced. Sarah nodded. Better, but don't muscle it. Let the ground do the work. Use what's already there. Repeated it over and over until the motion flowed like water. Sweat dripped from her jaw, her chest heaving, but her eyes shone. Finally, she dropped her arms. Instructor Martinez, can I ask you something? Sarah raised an eyebrow. You just did. Almost smiled. Why do you do this? I mean, you've already proved yourself 100 times over. Why keep fighting? Why keep teaching people like me? The question cut deeper than new. Why? Sarah thought of the men she'd killed in Afghanistan, of the Marines she'd saved, of the weight she still carried. Because one day, she said quietly, you'll be where I was, pinned down, outnumbered, out of time, and someone will depend on you. If what I teach keeps you alive long enough to make that choice, then it matters. Didn't answer. She only nodded, her respect complete now. But Sarah walked back to her quarters heavy, because every time she taught these lessons, she relived them. Every throw reminded her of an enemy she'd dropped. Every chokehold brought back the gasps of men she'd silenced. Every scar her recruits earned in training felt like a shadow of the ones carved into her memory. Teaching wasn't an escape, it was a mirror. Weeks passed. The recruits grew sharper, especially. She became a leader among them, her size and athleticism now tempered by humility and technique. She began pulling struggling recruits aside, echoing Sarah's words. Size isn't everything. Use what you have. Sarah watched with quiet pride and quiet sorrow because she knew what came next. Combat, the real thing, the place where lessons were tested in blood. Graduation neared. The recruits stood taller, leaner, their movements sharper, their eyes harder. They weren't finished Marines yet, but they were close. The night before the ceremony found Sarah again. Alone this time, no audience, no bravado. Instructor said, voice low, I was wrong about you, about everything. Sarah studied her. You weren't wrong, you were untested, there's a difference. Hesitated, then asked the question Sarah had been dreading. Do you ever stop seeing them? The ones you had to? Sarah's chest tightened. She had never spoken of it to recruits, not the details, not the dreams. No, she admitted. You don't stop seeing them, you just learn to carry them. Some days they're heavy, some days lighter, but they're always there. Nodded slowly, eyes dark. Then how do you keep going? Sarah looked past her, to the line of bunks, the quiet of the depot at night, the echoes of recruits who would one day become stories themselves. Because stopping means they win, Sarah said finally, and I won't let that happen. His eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. For the first time, Sarah saw not just a recruit, but a Marine. The next day, the ceremony unfolded under a sharp California sun. Families cheered. Senior officers clapped shoulders. Recruits stood tall in pressed uniforms, their eyes reflecting pride and fear in equal measure. Sarah shook each hand, offered each word of encouragement. When stepped forward, Sarah pulled her aside briefly. She said, voice firm but warm, you came here thinking strength was about size. You're leaving knowing it's about something else. Remember that. It'll save you one day. Swallowed hard, thank you, ma'am. Sarah released her, watching as joined the line of new Marines marching forward into futures none of them could predict. The applause rolled across the parade ground. Officers smiled. Families waved flags. But Sarah's eyes drifted upward, to the endless sky above the depot. She had done her part, passed on what she could, given them more than technique, given them a piece of herself. And yet, when the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, she stood alone for a moment. The pride was real, but so was the ache. Because passing on the torch didn't erase the fire still burning in her. It didn't silence the ghosts waiting in her sleep. Had found her strength, Sarah had given it to her. But who would give Sarah the peace she had yet to find? What does it mean to leave a legacy? 5 years after camp, Sarah Martinez stood once again before a class of recruits. Different faces, same mix of nerves, pride, and skepticism. Some whispered her name before she spoke. Others studied her small frame, doubt flickering in their eyes. She had grown used to it. Doubt never vanished, it only transformed. Her techniques were no longer experimental. They were doctrine now, woven into manuals taught at bases across the world. Marines who once would have been dismissed as too small, too weak, or too broken now carried themselves differently. They had proof in front of them. Proof that the fight wasn't about size, but about heart, will, and clarity under fire. And yet Sarah felt no triumph, only responsibility. Because every new class reminded her that what she taught would be tested not in gyms or training halls, but in dusty streets, in ambushes, in firefights where survival meant killing. She gave them tools, yes, but she also gave them burdens they didn't yet understand. One of those burdens now carried her lessons thousands of miles away. Sarah hadn't heard from her since graduation, but word traveled. In Syria, squad had been ambushed in a narrow alleyway, outnumbered, pinned, trapped, almost the same way Sarah's team had been years earlier in Afghanistan. Had led them out, not with brute force, not with sheer size, but with patience, technique, and unshakable calm. Reports said she had dropped 3 fighters herself, buying enough time for reinforcements to arrive. Every Marine in her squad survived. Sarah read the report twice. Pride surged. So did sorrow, because she knew what came next for the nights of silence, the faces that returned in dreams, the questions that never had clean answers. She whispered to herself, carry them, just carry them. It was what Sarah had done, what she still did. That night, sitting alone in her quarters, she pulled out an old box. Letters. Some written to her parents, some never sent. Some to Marines who never made it home. She unfolded one, her handwriting shaky, written after Afghanistan. Papa, Mama, I saved them, but I also killed them. I don't know how to hold both truths at once. She set it down, took a breath, and finally, after years, began writing again. They'll tell you you're a hero, they'll call you strong, but strength isn't about not breaking. It's about breaking and carrying on anyway. When the faces come back, don't push them away. Remember them, honor them, carry them. And when you train the next one, pass it on. That's how we endure. The words bled onto the page. Not instructions this time, not doctrine, just truth. The following week, Sarah returned to the mat with her recruits. The drill was the same as always, sparring, technique, repetition, but her voice carried softer weight now. Less sharp edge, more quiet depth. She paired them off, watched them stumble, correct, improve. She stepped in when necessary, demonstrating with the same calm precision she always had. But in her eyes, the recruits saw something more. Not just mastery, humanity. One of them asked quietly during a break, "Ma'am, how do you stay unshaken?" Sarah smiled faintly. "Who said I do?" The recruit blinked, caught off guard. She continued, "The truth is, you don't stop shaking. You just learn to move anyway, and that's enough." Silence fell, heavier than commands ever could. When the training cycle ended, Sarah stood again on the parade ground, watching another generation march forward. The flags rippled. The chants echoed. Pride swelled through the crowd. Jake, now a sergeant himself, stood nearby, grinning. "Look at them, Martinez. You built this. You changed the whole damn Corps." Sarah didn't answer right away. Her eyes tracked the recruits, their boots pounding in rhythm. Each step carried her lessons, her scars, her fire. Finally, she said quietly, "I didn't change the Corps. I just reminded it what we already were." Jake raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Sarah's gaze softened. "People who don't quit, no matter what they're told." The sun dipped lower, painting the horizon in fire. The recruits disappeared into the distance, swallowed by the future. Sarah remained still, hands folded behind her back, heart heavy but steady. She thought of her father, who once told her boxing wasn't for little girls. She thought of clapping slow after her first real fight. She thought of alive because she carried forward what Sarah had given her. And she thought of herself, the girl who once stood on yellow footprints while laughter echoed, the Marine who had faced giants and ghosts alike, the woman who had been both doubted and celebrated and respected. She drew a slow breath. Because in the end, legacy wasn't about applause. It wasn't about victories tallied or names remembered. Legacy was quieter, heavier. It lived in the choices of those who came after, in every Marine who stood taller because she had shown them how, in every life saved by lessons that had once saved her. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And Sarah Martinez had acted, until the world had no choice but to listen.